Sorry, Manosphere, but your precious little Pearl is a feminist. Hello, good people. It is Todd Shannon, data scientist, social commentator, getter of buckets, and I'm back to revisit this issue with Pearl, your girl Pearl, and her apparent feminism. Now, I was told on the last video that I didn't know what I was talking about. Somebody even said they don't think I understand what feminism is, and unfortunately for them, they are incorrect. I understand feminism quite well. It's just that what you all who don't understand the premise of my last video don't understand is you do not understand irony. Let's look it up, okay? Because I think it's worth having a good look at it. Oh, wait, this is not the one. I'm going to show this video here in a second, but because it's classic. But let's think about the word irony. Okay, let me zoom in here so that you understand. Irony. Definition 1. The use of words to express something different from and often opposite to their literal meaning. Interesting. 2. An expression or utterance marked by a deliberate contrast between apparent and intended meaning. This will mean something here in a moment. 3. Incongruity between what might be expected and what actually occurs. And this third one hits the target, I think, right on the head. Now, why is this important? The reason why I say Pearl is a feminist is not because she is intentionally a feminist, not because she actually claims to be a feminist, but that she is ironically a feminist. She doesn't realize that, just like the definition says, she's expressing an utterance or an idea that's where there's a contrast between the apparent and the intended meaning. Just like her actions and her ideas have an intended goal of, I guess, affirming traditional gender roles and trying to hold women accountable and not to be 304s and to be out here looking, crazy and doing OnlyFans and all that stuff. I understand that's her intention, but the effect of what she is saying is identical to the feminist ideology. In many ways, it is often even worse in some ways. And this incongruity between what might be expected and what actually occurs is how this plays out. Now, you saw just briefly, I had a little video up here. This is a comedian. His name's Ryan Long, and he illustrates this point perfectly. We're going to watch this video. The name of this video is called When Wokes and Racists Actually Agree. And the whole purpose of this bit is to explain how when you get so ridiculous, when you go so far to one extreme that you don't even realize, it's like a circle. If you start at one point in a circle and then you decide you're going to go to the right and you say, I'm going to go far, I don't like where I'm at, I'm going to go to the right. So you go as far as you can to the right. Well, if you keep going and you keep going, you just get right back to where you started. And if you don't know that, if you don't know that these things are a continuum or some sort of circle, then you'll keep going to the right thinking you're doing something different than the people you were trying to get away from. But in fact, you and them are the same person, or you're in the same spot at least. So the whole purpose of this is to show how, ironically, the woke person and the avowed racist are actually the same, when in fact, in their minds, they're trying to do something completely different. Let's have a listen.
When me and Brad first met, I didn't think we'd get along, but turns out we kind of agree on everything. Your racial identity is the most important thing. Everything should be looked at through the lens of race.
Jinx, you owe me a Coke. We both have a lot of opinions about people of color, even though we barely know any.
I say colored people, but as long as we're classifying them, we both think minorities are a united group who think the same and act the same.
And vote the same. You don't want to lose your black card. Sorry, I don't know. I just think we should
roll back discrimination laws so we can hire based on race again. Jinx, now you owe me a Coke. Hey, tell them what you told me yesterday.
White actors should only do voices for white cartoon
I've been
characters.
saying that for years. Stick to your own.
Us white people, we have so much privilege.
I agree. It is a privilege to be white. Ask him about interracial dating.
All I said is that black men who date white women have internalized racism, and white men that date ethnic women are fetishizing them.
Guys against interracial dating now. Like, am I being pranked? Did Boomer put you up to this?
Ugh, you know that taco place is white owned?
White people should be making white foods like Kraft macaroni and cheese, no seasoning, not even salt. It's like he's a mind reader. I mean, I've been pushing for segregation forever, and my man does what?
I created an improv comedy show exclusively for ethnic people.
Guy segregates comedy on my birthday.
White people need to stop wearing dreadlocks, and they need to stop appropriating black people's music.
Shaved heads and country music, the way God intended.
You know all white people are racist.
I'm listening.
Even if you have a black wife or a black friend group, you're still really racist.
You know, we just kicked a guy out of the organization for having a black girlfriend, but if you can promise me he's still really racist, we'll consider letting him back in.
All right. So I think you get the point, right? You get the point. The woke person with very different intentions and with very different objectives basically is doing the same thing as the avowed racist, right? So you get it. Now, do you understand irony? Now, do you understand why I say Pearl is a feminist? Let's go back and listen to the conversation that Andrew Klavan is having with Pearl, because in the first one, we talked about how Pearl thinks that men are better at everything. Andrew Klavan made the obvious point, well, men are not better at being women. They're not better at being mothers. They're not better at doing, things that, like, I don't know, women do, which is the whole point, and which is why her ideology is so twisted, because she is measuring the value and the worth of a woman on the terms of a male. And this is exactly what feminists do and why they get it wrong. This is why feminists basically become masculine, and they kind of despise their feminine traits in a way, because that's what they do. They think that being a man is the ultimate goal, or being masculine is the ultimate goal, because they covet what men do and what men have. But let's listen to her talk about marriage. And what you'll find is that she makes these arguments. She tries to, this is where Pearl gets a little disingenuous, because she tries to pretend like she is not trying to push men and women in any particular direction, and particular men. She always talks about how terrible marriage is, how bad of a deal marriage is for men, but then she tries to say, well, I'm not telling men not to get married. So listen to this exchange between Pearl and Andrew Klavan, and this will be pretty telling.
What does a man get out of marriage that he doesn't get out of a live-in girlfriend?
Well, that's kind of a strange question, because if she's a live-in girlfriend, then,
which is not uncommon nowadays.
But a live-in girlfriend is effectively acting the wife, and can in this country anyway, after a while, can divorce you the same as a wife can. So there's no advantage to it. So I mean, that's a weird.
Right. So it's not an unfair question. Why does he have to get the state involved?
Okay. So let's just first establish a couple things. Her contention, and she's made this point in other places, and she'll make it again here, is that basically the system is set up such that marriage is a bad deal for men. Basically, men have more to lose. Besides the fact that this isn't actually true, okay, both parties have something to lose. I would say fundamentally, marriage is riskier for women. She's almost speaking from a perspective of assuming that every man that gets married has, like, hundreds of thousands of dollars in net worth, or maybe millions in net worth. They have all these assets and have all of this stuff to lose. A lot of men bring nothing to the table financially, or they bring very little. Or even when they divorce, in many cases, it's the women, because of modern feminism to boot, it's the women that actually are responsible for accumulating much of the assets. And so it's, the idea that a man's going to lose everything to a woman, you're talking about a very narrow selection of men who are in that situation, to where financially they have a lot at risk, and when you're talking about like professional athletes, musicians, actors, people like this, or business owners, that might be true, but that's such a narrow sliver of the male population that this is kind of not really an accurate picture of marriage more broadly. And which goes back to a point that I made in the last video, which is that Pearl doesn't understand that she actually is only observing and interacting with a very narrow sliver of the population, and she overgeneralizes, thinking that those characteristics or the sliver of the population she interacts with is representative of the whole, and it's obviously not the case. But the point that she's making is about why get the state involved. Well, that might be a fair question, but what this is goes back to what I was saying about godless conservatism, right? Because the state is a secondary party with respect to marriage and recognizing marriage. Marriage is God's idea. You know, if there were no legal ramifications or there was no state that would enforce marriage or anything like that, I would still get married because my marriage would be valid before God. And that's the reason why I got married in the first place, is because marriage is a good thing. It's an institution that God set up. It's made for the flourishing of children and for society more broadly. And so this is the first error that she's making, is to thinking that the state invented marriage. The state didn't invent marriage. The state recognizes marriage. So let's listen to what she has to say.
Well, it's not, for many of us, it's not the state, it's the church. I mean, it's a religious act. And it also, I mean, look, I got married. When I got married, I had lived with my wife for 2 years. I saw absolutely no reason to get married except, you know, we wanted to have kids and we wanted to be a family with one name. And so we got married. And the minute I got married, I knew everything had changed, because people are ritual oriented. Ritual means something. And so the marriage did change everything. It changed it on the instant. I mean, I knew the second I did it. I knew the second I did it, I'd done the smartest thing I'd ever done.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about your marriage though. And I think sometimes you guys take it kind of personal, where it's like, well, not. But I'm saying, because you guys always refer to your marriages, but we're not.
Why is Pearl assuming that everyone can't have a marriage like Andrew Klavan? You know, what's the use in assuming that, or assuming that many, not necessarily, if not everyone, a significant or a meaningful portion of men and women can have marriages like the one they have. There's no reason why you can't. The issue is not marriage. The issue, you know, it's like building a house, right? You can have the most amazing blueprints and plans and architecture and engineering imaginable, but if the materials are garbage, right? If you try to build your house out of you know wood, hay, and stubble, right? Well, maybe not wood, because we actually do build houses out of wood, but like weak materials that are not. If you try to build a house out of styrofoam, okay, it doesn't matter how well engineered it is; it's just not going to stand. And so what Pearl doesn't understand is that the reason why marriage is in a bad state right now is because the people don't have the character to execute it. And that's not an issue with marriage, that's an issue with the people. Let's listen.
I'm not talking about you guys.
Well, I'm
talking about marriage as an institution. The average marriage is 8 years.
But what I'm
70% are filed by women. Only 5% of women are marriageable under the age of 35.
That only 5% of women are marriageable under 35 is a absurd and ridiculous. I don't know where she's getting that from. She used some weird things like they don't have tattoos and they have no debt. It's like that's weird criteria. But let's listen.
90% of child support and alimony goes to women from men. 30% of divorces are malicious. It's not about you guys, but overall the institution.
So there again, now Pearl is demonstrating that she can't think in proper categories. What she is describing are the laws surrounding the institution. She's not describing the institution. And it isn't really clear to me, for example, when she talks about divorces being malicious. I mean, doesn't she realize that? I mean, I don't know. I haven't been out in the world in a long time. My wife and I have been married for nearly 20 years. Thank God for that. So I don't know what it's like exactly right now. But I see a lot of stuff a lot of drama, a lot of issues online where people breaking up, and it's every bit as nasty and ugly as an actual divorce. You might as well say it was a divorce. They weren't officially married, but it still got every bit as ugly. The whole thing, what do they call it? Revenge porn. That's a thing. I mean, that gets pretty malicious. I don't think you have to be married to someone to do that. So she's kind of not thinking in proper categories and making a silly argument. Why doesn't she want to fix the laws? Why wouldn't you say, hey, let's encourage people to be married because marriage is good, but let's have it such that let's get rid of, say, for example, no fault divorce. Why not get rid of that? That was a very bad thing that was instituted, several decades ago, maybe a generation ago. It's been really bad for everyone. Why not get it to? Why not fix the laws now that women work more, such that alimony and child support are more equitable for both parties, right? Instead of being based on a bygone era where most of the women were stay-at-home moms and didn't really have a career. So if you divorce and you got that alimony and child support, in a previous generation, a woman would not have been able to survive without that. Now that women are more independent, they work, they earn their own money, why not switch to a different system? Why wouldn't she advocate for that instead of saying, don't get married? You know who else is saying don't get married? The feminists.
How can you look at those numbers and not see that it's broken? Something's wrong.
Well, again, it's high risk, high reward.
Well, again, but you always attribute the reward to marriage.
Well, because
I think I'll give you an example. I think that successful men were going to be successful anyways. I don't think you can attribute it just to their family and women.
You see what I'm saying? Do you see what I'm saying? This is the way. Now, this is not so much a attribute of the feminism as it is of the godless materialism, right? Because, and this is where I say, this is where Pearl appeals to the toxic version of masculinity. And I hate to use that word because I think it's kind of a cheap word. It's kind of like racism. People say it all the time. It doesn't really mean anything. But there is such a thing as misogyny, toxic masculinity, where you have a bunch of men who see women as ornaments or as expenses, right? It's just like, well, I'm going to go out and get my empire built, and I'm going to, amass, these materials and amass these materials. And so for her, apparently, according to Pearl, a successful marriage doesn't have anything to do with actual success. Like a successful marriage and a family and actually growing your social circle in a way that is deep and meaningful, such that you create a generation of new people who then go out and establish their own successful homes. I can tell you something. Some of the happiest people I ever met are grandparents who stayed married, and now they have children who are married, and then those children have children, and then they get to have a good time with those grandkids. Those are some of the happiest people I've ever seen. That's success. As a matter of fact, a big part of what I would consider as a man success is that to see my son and to see my daughters to reproduce what their mother and I have created in the home that they grew up in. That's how I measure success, not going to some job or starting some business or amassing a bunch of meaningless resources for no reason. And here's another thing. This is important to understand. I'll give you an example. And I think Pearl, she played professional volleyball or something like that. I'll tell you a story about my daughter who recently graduated from high school. When my daughter was still playing, I was literally trying to figure out ways that I could earn more money so that I could give her a better chance or a better leg up to compete in volleyball, because part of what drove me was to be able to give my kids a better life. I wasn't doing it for me. And that's actually what drives a lot of married men. To the drive to, quote, be successful in the way that she thinks it is kind of squarely defined, which is, maybe material success and success in business. What drives a lot of those men is providing for their children, not necessarily going out so they can drive these nice cars. I know that's a lot of men's motivations, but for most men, they want to do something for the people that they love. That's what really drives people. Married men, by the way, earn more than single men. So there's got to be something to that. And the ironic thing is that with feminism, for example, feminists see men who are married being driven, most of them being driven primarily to do for their families. They think that the men are doing it not for their family's sake, but for some, glory of, being out there, being the leaders, quote unquote, that they think they can be. And they think that they're doing that independent of and despite their family, when in fact they're doing it because they're family. But modern feminism, in their bloodlust, or their thirst, I should say, to emulate the men that they despise, those women want to go out and they want to have that sort of success at the expense of their family. Feminist women are not working to put their kids in a better situation. And this is, there again, another irony. The feminists are chasing something that the men that they despise and are trying to emulate, that's not even what we're doing. We're not out here working hard so that we can say, look at me, look at how cool I am, look at how much stronger I am than the women that I stepped over to get to this spot. No, we're doing it for our families. And if they had the same objective, if we could get women to have the same objective, then they'll direct their actions and their goals toward the flourishing of their families, except they make a contribution in a uniquely feminine way. So success, in part, is a successful family, when she doesn't think, apparently, that is part of the deal.
I think men that are on a mission are on a mission regardless. They're going to be successful.
That's
regardless.
not true.
Women select for successful men. I don't attribute it to marriage and family. I attribute it to men following maybe God and their purpose.
But isn't it kind of strange that all those successful men, the first thing they do when they stand up at an awards dinner is thank their wives? They seem to feel that their wives had something to do with it.
Andrew Klavan. Let me tell you something about Andrew Klavan. When I first watched this, I thought he was just being way too passive with her, because she's saying some really, really stupid things. But Andrew Klavan he's crafty. Look at it. Look at the gray on his beard there. He's pretty crafty. He's checking her, and she probably doesn't even know it, right? He's just trying to say, interesting. All those successful men, they always seem to want to get married. Go figure, right? Andrew Klavan is really trying to gently say, listen, lady, you don't know what you're talking about because you're not actually in a family. See, here's the thing. Pearl, as far as I know, she's not married. And this is another thing that I hate about a lot of these people out here. You got all these people giving this relationship advice and they're not married. To me, in my opinion, you need to be married for 10 years with a couple kids, and you need to be happily married before you start telling somebody what they ought to be doing in their relationships. Before you start speaking on it, you don't have the first clue what you're talking about. Okay, that's why it always tripped me out with what's the guy's name that passed away? Kevin Samuel. Like, the dude ain't married. It's just crazy to me how he playing, matchmaker and telling these women what they're supposed to do, and the men talking about high value men. You ain't married, my guy. All right.
Well, 49% of billionaires are divorced.
So you're saying, you're saying two things. I mean, it's one thing. See, the point where I agree with you is I think that marriage can be a bad deal from the stats. But you're saying two things that, like, you're actually saying that marriage itself, which has made so many of the men I know will attribute not just their success but their manhood to marriage. They'll say, like, my marriage made a man out of me. So
no,
so you're saying it's bad even when it's good.
No, I didn't say that. I think there are good marriages out there.
No.
You see how look at Pearl. She's so, gosh, I'm trying to be nice. She so obviously doesn't know what the heck she's talking about. She scoffs at the idea that marriage is a crucible wherein you become a man. She scoffs at that idea. Of course she wouldn't know anything about the character building nature of a marriage, how it forces you to be selfless, how it forces you to think about others, how it forces you to learn how to be faithful, to honor your vows, to have self-discipline, self-control. All of these things that contribute to a long-term successful marriage. You think people it's almost like she thinks getting a divorce is like some passive thing that happens to you, like you're carried along by the wind. No, people who get divorced, people who don't have successful marriages, almost always it is the result of the fact that those people are not developing on a personal level. They're not improving their character on a personal level. People who are actually high character, their marriages will be successful because they know how to be selfless and how to focus on their marriage such that they put the marriage first and they put their children first and they put the first things first, and they don't let, career pursuits or, petty differences tear them apart. That takes a lot of development as a human being. And of course, Pearl wouldn't understand that because she probably barely have had a boyfriend in her life. She's never had to commit to anything. It's easy to stand and, sit in front of a camera and talk about things that you've never experienced.
But I don't think it's the rule. I think it's the exception. Why do we have phrases like it's cheaper to keep her? Happy wife, happy life. Why are those common?
Well, I think those are really dumb phrases.
Well, it doesn't matter if you think they're dumb. It matters that they exist.
But right?
You're talking, and why isn't if marriage was such a good deal, why aren't men signing up?
You're talking about two separate things, though. You're talking about the culture, which is we're obviously in a sick culture. We all know. I think everybody knows that. But you're also talking about the question. Let me put it to you this way: what do you think a man's life should look like? Because, for instance, I think if I said what should a man's life look like, it would include marriage and family and children. I think that would be the best thing. Now, you want to say, here's a guy who shouldn't be like that, or here's a society that's falling apart and makes it difficult. Those are two different things. But what do you think a man's life should look like?
So you see, obviously, Drew is putting his finger on, because Andrew can think in proper categories, he's not attributing the lack of success in marriage to the institution of marriage itself. It's not because there's something wrong with the institution. There's something wrong with our culture, and the culture that produces people who cannot maintain and be successful in a marriage. That's a problem. But the answer to that is to fix the culture and to fix the things that make marriage difficult. There's nothing wrong with marriage. It's like saying, my steering wheel doesn't work. Let's get rid of the car. Or a more common phrase, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. That's dumb.
I think every man has to decide that for himself.
Right.
Like Jesus wasn't married.
Oh, Lord.
Okay, well, exempt the
No,
son.
I'm
if we can
saying there's
exempt, if we can
examples-
exempt the Son of God for a minute.
But there's examples of great men in history that didn't get married.
Yeah, but there's examples of great
I
men in
think
history who were
every-
miserable too. I mean, that's not a good argument.
I know, but that's my point. I don't think marriage is for every man, and there's not enough wives.
See, now and Andrew Klavan is going to point this out, and we won't watch all of this because we just barely halfway through it. But then she's going to devolve into kind of like, first, now she's saying, oh, it's not for everyone, but really the whole thrust of her entire empire of garbage content is that men shouldn't get married. Most men shouldn't get married by her own by her own admission, by her own weird criterion, by the way. Only 5% of women are even marriageable. So that means only 5% of men should seriously consider it. If I'm going by what she said on this podcast and on other places in her content. So she's trying to say, oh, well, everyone's got to decide. I'm not saying. But I'm also saying it is terrible and only, 5% of women in the world can be marriageable in the first place. So she's trying to pretend like she's not trying to discourage men from getting married, and that's not true. So, in my conclusion, this would probably be my final Pearl video, unless you guys want more of this. I'll be happy to elucidate the folly of one Pearl, or whatever her situation is. Maybe not this conversation necessarily with Andrew Klavan, but I think Andrew Klavan, I encourage you to watch this entire thing. I think it's pretty eye-opening. It's about, like I said, about 36 minutes. But let me know. Let me know what you think in the comments. Am I off my rocker? There again, I hope I have educated you on what irony actually means. And then hopefully you can take that and learn something from it. Let me know in the comments what you think. Like and subscribe. Make sure you tell somebody about Todd Thinks. Till next time, friends. God bless you.